lacrosse takes its place in Palm Beach County, the economic impact with a tournament that's bigger than any around the world. Certainly growing at all levels. The professional indoor game on the men's side, Commissioner Nick Sakiewicz, a friend and has been involved in sports in a number of ways, an executive who developed the stadiums for MLS in Philadelphia and in Harrison, New Jersey. He brings his expertise to growing the sport of lacrosse. Here is Nick Sakiewicz now.
Nick Sakiewicz has been a longtime friend. He's been the commissioner of the National Lacrosse League since 2016. He was involved as one of the few, if the only, brain trust behind the Major League Soccer for many years. He built, almost single-handedly, with a little bit of help, Red Bull Stadium in Harrison, New Jersey, and the Philadelphia Union Stadium, and then got out of soccer. He exited voluntarily soccer, and now he has been the full-time commissioner of the National Lacrosse League in a 30-year league, and has taken it from the effective dark ages to one of the newest, greatest, best leagues you could possibly imagine. So, Nick Sakiewicz, further elaboration. Nick, you were, as I said and mean, in many ways, the king of soccer for a long time. You grew up as a soccer player. You grew up as one of the world-class goalies that nobody knew. You grew up as a business guy in soccer. Then you went over to lacrosse, and the transition has been seamless. What made it so seamless? I understand it's harder than I'm making it out to be, but you still had to master two sports, even though there were some common principles involved.
I'm a glutton for punishment. Selling a sport, international sport in a country in the 80s and 90s that a country really didn't want to embrace was really difficult. And look at it today. Learned a lot of lessons in that league, most of which were that if you stick at something long enough and you stick around long enough, that you can make something really, really successful. And today, 2 stadiums in my trophy cabinet and 3 teams managed, and owned the Philadelphia Union at the end was a great journey. But I'm even more excited, and that felt actually like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But then leaving that, going into another niche sport. Someone mentioned about how important niche sports are. Lacrosse is kind of the soccer of the 70s and 80s. It's a growing sport. It's booming sport, in fact. We're sitting in a market where it's been a historical sport for many, many years, but now it's growing across the continent, across the world, actually. Over 55 countries now play the sport. And it really speaks to what Paul said earlier, is that there are shifts and changes in society with the next generation of leaders coming through. The millennial and Gen Z generation is a group of two very large groups of consumers that care about cause, and how it all ties back to what these folks are doing here at EverFi and what you're doing at United Way, and what many of the leagues and teams are really beginning to understand is that sports teams and leagues are a fabric of the community, and not always has sport and professional teams understood that. I think the Gen Z and millennials are making them understand that. Why? Because they care about cause. It's no longer they buy a ticket and come to a game. They want to be part of that game, and they're only coming if they believe in that league and that sport. So it's really exciting, probably having more fun in lacrosse than I did in soccer, because lacrosse is truly at its nascent point in its development, only played pretty much in North America at the top level. Very different than soccer, because in soccer we were importing a sport. Right. Lacrosse, we're exporting it because it was born here. So it's an interesting time, but frankly, I just love projects that people say you can't succeed in. And they did that in MLS, and it succeeded, and people are kind of saying that about lacrosse, but we're growing and booming right now.
Remind me not to say that at the beginning of our next golf game. That'll get me in trouble. I don't want you more motivated than you are. The bottom line, too, of how I perceive your comments is that a lot of new organization heads will treat philanthropy and social good and community activism as kind of a second phase. Let's get ourselves organized, let's get the metrics right, then we can afford to give. Heard that a lot. Sounds like to reach millennials, especially in this digital world, you've got to be all in on what an athlete is and what that platform and asset does for the community as well. Talk about that for a second.
Yeah, well, I think the millennial and Gen Z generation is changing the way we're viewing sport. The iPhone in your pocket's a television today, and it's a marketing tool. And you know, we're really fortunate in lacrosse because we have a built-in cause to our marketing, to our brand narrative, and that's the indigenous native population. 10% of the professional players in our league are amongst the best players in the world, and 10% of our total players are indigenous, Native Canadians or Native Americans. So we have a built-in cause right out of the gate that we're able to wrap our brand around and go to the market. We invest heavily in that. It's front and center of our philanthropic activity. Those communities are amongst the poorest in Canada and the US. They're also the most underserved, and you know, we put a lot of effort behind that. And our partners, our broadcast partner, Turner Sports, our non-endemic brands like Anheuser-Busch and Geico, they are behind us 100% of the way to really reach out to that indigenous community. So we almost, by nature of, because our sport was invented thousands of years ago by indigenous natives of North America, we have no choice, but we have to embrace that diversity and that inclusion.
Nick, you don't have the problem of the $12 million a year athlete, but you do have, clearly, nor the $12 million commissioner, by the way, but you do have the issue of players behaving well and also players behaving badly. What's your take on all of that?
Yeah, no, we're kind of like the NFL 50 years ago. Our guys are making about that kind of money right now. So they're not playing for the paycheck. They're playing for the love of the game, and they want to be well paid, and they're very aspirational. We have an amazing bunch of players that I have almost zero issues with as a commissioner. Actually, we have more problems with fans in our arenas going sideways than we do have with our players. But I'm really proud. One of my proudest moments in sports was a situation that happened right up the road in Philadelphia last year. Inaugural season, 13,000 people at Wells Fargo Center, and they're playing Georgia. And on Georgia's team is a player by the name of Lyle Thompson. He's amongst one of the best lacrosse players in the world, and he's an indigenous Native American, and he has a ponytail down to the middle of his back. So Philadelphia fans, the way Philadelphia fans only can be, started chanting, a small group of them started chanting, "Cut his braid." And so then the PA announcer started to incite them a little bit, and we had this bit of an incident that was not good. And the reason I'm so proud about that moment is because after the game, the player was interviewed and was the absolute most first-class reaction to all of it. Both teams reacted positively in a very positive, supportive way of the player. Within 12 hours, the league had responded. The PA announcer was terminated. A statement was made, and then articles for the next 12 months were written about what a great reaction that was. So in sport, we're often judged by the action, but that's not really the case in this situation. We're judged by the reaction. And it was the proudest moment I've ever had in sport because our player stepped up and said really good things about the fans, didn't go negative, and really he's not media trained. And so inherently, you know, he had that positive reaction. I have this with almost every player in our league. They're an amazing group, and really what drew me to this league was the quality of those players. The players really make a difference, one way or the other, whether they do good or they do not so good. And I think it's all too often society and media tends to focus on the not too good stuff that comes out of the players from all sports, but there's a lot of good stuff that happens there.
Where is the business and philanthropy aspect of the business going in the next 50 years, and what advice would you give people out there relative to that?
So philanthropy really for us is at the core of our narrative and going to be, I don't know about 50 years, Rick. I'm 58. I'm probably going to be worried about the next 3 to 10 years, but 50 years is a long time from now for our sport. We will be 16 teams over the next 3 years, but philanthropy, the way we view it, is really about what Paul just said, which is really wrapping our business around philanthropy, which is inclusion, diversity, And I don't mean just diversity by male, female, color of skin, more so diversity of thought, bringing different cultures into our organization. And we have a great advantage with our heritage of the indigenous peoples that I spoke about earlier, where we get a real diverse thought product out of that. And really, the brand message of the National Lacrosse League will be to speak to the young generation. We're handing the reins over to the millennial and Gen Z generation, many of whom are sitting in this room today, and you all care about cause. So if you really want to have a successful business, a company, whether it's a professional sports league, a team, or a business, should care about cause, because that's what the next generation of leaders is bringing. So we can't get paid in smiles. We have to make money at some point because we're all for-profit businesses. But by having a really well-founded narrative around cause, A, it's doing the right thing, and B, it's just good for business, is to be able to wrap yourself around what's your particular cause to the marketplace, because that next wave of consumers, baby boomers, we're all dying, we're all aging out, but that next wave is coming, and they're bigger than the baby boomers. So I see the next 3 to 5 years of the NLL is going to be very focused, at least under my leadership, on philanthropy, but in a way that wraps ourselves around